Hey, what's up, guys? I got a comment in one of my earlier videos asking about controller mapping for a game without native controller support, and it got me thinking. There are a ton of great older PC games that can work surprisingly well on some handhelds, but getting the controls working right can take some serious finessing. So today I'm looking at 5 great PC games that don't have native controller support and showing you how I've mapped them for a handheld. I'll talk about a couple of other options, and I'll show you a little bit of gameplay from each one, and then I'll break it down on a controller map that I'm using, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about some of the compromises you'll have to take with each one. These aren't meant to be gospel either. They're just starting points you can take to adapt to your own playstyle and your own needs. So with that out of the way, guys, let's get right into the first game. Modern Warfare 2. Juggernauts, Hans Zimmer, Spec Ops, one of the quintessential shooters of its generation. This game is actually surprisingly low compromise when it comes to controls. There's a bit of sound choppy issues. I'm actually playing mine through Winlator. I haven't tried it recently through GameNative or GameHub, but it's probably working fine there. But as far as controller support, you get a pretty standard affair here. On Winlator, to adjust controls, you pull in from the left side and go to Input Controls, and then you can create a profile or load one up. And then on the pull downs on the left, you can select keyboard or mouse. And then basically every sort of controller button that you push is going to set a value on the right, so you can adjust things over there based on your mapping. I won't keep this in your face for too long, but this is my mapping. It's fairly standard as far as movement, WASD. You've got your mouse movement on the controls for the right stick with V for melee. You've got your toggle ADS or hold, depending on your preference, on the left control trigger. And then you got fire on the right, reload on the X. This is all fairly standard stuff. You got night vision on the bottom, noob tube on the left, and your kill streak or your drone controls, which actually does come up in the campaign on the right D-pad. I played this on 360 back in the day, so this feels fairly faithful to that. Really, the only kind of compromise with this particular game is the turning speed with the mouse is a little bit weird. It doesn't have that proper acceleration, but generally speaking, it works pretty well. For some of these games like Modern Warfare 2, Pad Mapper or some other third party solutions can help here too, so keep that in mind if you want to do something a little bit more streamlined. Warcraft 3. Blizzard made some incredible RTS games back in the day and in the age before all they cared about was Overwatch and Call of Duty. Most RTS games are honestly pretty easy to configure when it comes to controls, providing you're okay with controlling the mouse with the control stick. You can obviously use a Bluetooth mouse as well, but let's go ahead and look at the mapping for this one. With a lot of these more traditional RTS games, you can get away with a configuration very much like this, with mouse controls on the left stick, and then you're panning the map with the right stick, and then you've usually got menu access with your start and select buttons, or a map. In this case, we got objectives, and then you've got your mouse buttons on A and B, and then usually something for hotkeys. In this case, we've got the hero commands for X, and then getting in and out of those menus with the Y button through escape mapping. If you like old school RTS games and somehow haven't played Warcraft 3, definitely check this game out. Thief 2: The Metal Age. The Eidos Thief games of the late 90s are absolute quintessential stealth games, way ahead of their time in many ways. They follow Thief Garrett as he navigates this dark gothic horror sort of steampunk world to survive and fatten his pockets. The music is dark and so is the atmosphere, so if you want to sneak around and snag some loot and shoot some taffers in the face with a water arrow, this is a great game to check out. If you can make it through the original Half-Life in terms of late 90s aesthetics, then you can get through this game too. Once again, I have my game here installed through the offline GOG installers and running through Winlator, though all of this will largely be the same in GameNative and GameHub. When it comes to actually mapping them to a controller, it is unfortunately one of the more complicated handheld mappings, but it is definitely doable. The particular challenge with this game is you will probably need to edit some of the control mappings inside the game itself. It will help to have a Bluetooth keyboard standing by because erasing some of the old bindings from there means hitting backspace and alt as a hotkey to clear those. But my mapping is largely derived from the original mapping, so you shouldn't have to change too much of that. So let's go ahead and take a look at the control mapping for this stealth classic. There is a little bit of control compromise for this game because it uses a full keyboard, but once again, here we've got the WASD controls for movement, except for we also have walk slowly is up on the D-pad because sound carries and can get you detected in certain situations. One of the directions on the D-pad gets your next inventory item, the other is your next weapon. Normal weapon control for the right trigger. You got block and jump both for the left trigger. You can only block when you have the sword equipped, which you should not have often. You've got use item for A button there, and then you've also got toggle crouch, and then you can use zoom controls for Garrett's remote control I, and that is sort of the general gist of things here. You've got lean as the RB and LB, and that's sort of the main things you can drop items so down in the D-pad because you're going to pick up some things like gold and some things that are not necessarily loot, but that should get you through most situations with this layout. Both Thief 1 and Thief 2 have some great HD texture packs. They're a little complicated to load in, but if you're willing to use up the space and if you're willing to kind of do some tinkering, they're really nice in the visuals. This is actually the standard graphics for this game. Silent Hunter 3. This is a sub simulation game from 2005. There's actually still a couple of games after this as well, so the series still exists, but this is one of the most popular titles to this day. And I think this is one of those games where my dad had bought it and never played it, and I pretty much co opted it and just played the hell out of it in the mid 2000s. And there's just something really addictive about this game loop where you're kind of hunting around and plotting the perfect torpedo shot, and just, you could do all kinds of missions and career modes, and it's actually pretty complex without being unapproachable. So it's definitely a great kind of simulator game if you like these sorts of things without being, impossible to do. However, it is slightly compromised in terms of controls because if you look at the controller map for this game, yeah. Well, so it's certainly probably the most compromised of the games on this list, but it is doable. And the fortunate thing about this game is even the controls that you don't have hotkeyed, you can use the kind of in-game controls. If you use your mouse to hover over the left or top edges of the screen, you basically get access to all of the things anyway. So you can pull up the map or the periscope or your damage control or your map plotting, sonar. All of those things can pretty much be accessed with the mouse, as well as things like the depth of the submarine and your boat speed and things like that. A lot of that is still in this situation going to be done with the mouse. There is hotkeys for some, so let's go ahead and take a look at those now. As you can see, this one's a little bit complicated. I won't keep it up too long. This is one of those ones you're going to want to take a look at it yourself rather than sitting having me explain the whole thing. Mouse movement on the left stick. You've got the surface and periscope depths on the D-pad there, as well as time compression and all stop, which is the stop for that. It's kind of one of those compromises. Event camera, left trigger. You got a hotkey for the bridge. You got one for the nav map and the command room, which is one of your main ones, binoculars, so you can look around. And on R3, you've got your attack periscopes. You can actually make your shots. So that's sort of the basics here. Otherwise, it's fairly standard sort of thing. But honestly, like, do what works for you if you're into a game like this, because it's very much a trial and error, really. And there's definitely some compromise here just because it uses so much of the keyboard in a real setup. Dragon Age Origins, the game where the question first came up about this. So, if anyone's very familiar with this game, they're going to realize that this is a fairly compromised experience. Yes, this game was ported to Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, but this is the PC version, which, I mean, frankly, even those games, the mapping's not fantastic anyway, and it feels fairly similar to how I ended up with this, I believe. Granted, I don't have a ton of experience with this game. I've got this game playing out of GameNative this time, so you can go to your normal controls menu in game, but honestly, I pretty much use the same sort of default bindings as far as the in-game settings for this one. But using GameNative, you want to make sure the controls for that application actually match up with these as needed, so you want to swipe from the left and go to the D-pad icon, and then you select physical controls to edit how those are mapped. This is where we're going to input the controls for our semi-compromised binding for this game. So let's go ahead and take a look at that next. Once again, I'm not going to talk about every single option here. You can take a look at this and see what might works for you. Some of the highlights to pay attention to, we've got the mouse buttons on the triggers. You've got the LB and RB handling the zoom in and out of the character. You've got pretty much your menu access for the face buttons. And interestingly, the quick slots. We've got 1 through 4 available, even though there's significantly more than that in this game. But that's about all you're going to manage without some extra mappable buttons. But it also gives you quick access to those as far as the conversation. So you've normally got 1 through 4 for conversation answers, so you can easily use the D-pad rather than having to move the mouse over everything to select those options. This is another one of those situations where you can more or less do most of the things with the mouse. Not very convenient. So you want to hotkey the things that you definitely don't want to be always moving the mouse around with. So that's kind of how I got this one to work. You've got, a button to select all the team members, but if you want to do just one, you'd click on it manually on the portraits. So that's generally how I get around that sort of thing. But again, this is a semi-compromised experience because it's one of those games that's used to using an entire keyboard. So, if there's purists out there, this is probably heresy to them. But, if you want to take this game on the go on this handheld, this is what you got to do. So maybe try something like PadMapper. There might be third-party utility for something like this, but this is how I have mine mapped, and generally speaking, it's worked okay for me in the early hours of this game. This is not meant to be an endgame solution anyway. It's to help point you in the right direction toward the mapping that works for you. But I will put a link to a Google Drive for the mappings in the description if you want to check those out. Then you can enjoy all the interesting things about these games without having to worry too much about not having a keyboard with you. That's going to do it for this one, guys. If you liked the video, drop a like for me or subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.